Hello everyone. How are we doing? Hopefully you can see and hear. I'm sure you can. Just as it's just at the top of the hour, I'll give everyone another minute or two just to join us, and then we can move forward.
Maybe just as a reminder for everyone to use the Q&A panel to ask questions during the presentation if you have any burning questions. Maybe don't use the chat. It'll be easier to see everyone's messages and answer in the Q&A.
Yeah, there we go. It's a minute past.
It's in the top bar if you've not used that in Teams before.
It's a minute past, so in the interest of time, I will begin. First of all, thank you all very much for taking the time out today to come and sit with us over the course of this hour, or maybe slightly less, to sit down and discuss automating products and integrating tools, and taking a look at what KOPE has done recently and our latest integrations into Tekla Structures and Revit. A little bit of housekeeping, as Radu just mentioned there. If you wouldn't mind using the Q&A section, you can find that in the very top bar of the Teams window. We will most likely have some time for a Q&A towards the end, and so we'll use that. But then it also allows us to track it a little bit better, and we can get back in touch with you guys as well. If you do have a question but you don't necessarily want to bring it to the table in front of everyone, I know some folks get shy. Please feel free to reach out to any of us. You can use our website, or you can drop our emails, drop us an email personally. So you have, I don't know where it's the pleasure, but you have me for the first part of this demonstration. I'm Sam Cummings. I'm the head of products here at KOPE, and I'm joined by our CTO Radu Gidi, and he will be taking the Revit section of this, and then together we will be able to answer the questions that you guys might have. So take a little bit of a guess. Most of the folks in this call will have at least seen KOPE, but I wanted to introduce to you a little bit while this video is playing exactly what we're doing. We're essentially transforming the way that buildings are designed and delivered. Construction's really changing fast when you take things like offsite, platform and product-based approaches that are very quickly becoming the new standard. We have a look at the tools that we use to design and coordinate these buildings, and they haven't necessarily kept up. In a lot of cases, they're slow, they're fragmented, and they're not necessarily built for the way that modern construction works, or at least the way we want to work in modern day construction. And we're here to challenge and change that. Our platform connects manufacturers, designers and contractors, which make it really easy to configure real products into real buildings right from the very beginning. And that's whether you're working with a wall system, or whether you're working with a frame, whether it's on a hospital or a high-rise building. As you can see here, we're not just visualizing models, we're actually powering decision making through KOPE. And that means that we can get this really clear, instant feedback on things like feasibility, things like cost, things like carbon, and then create a seamless path from that conceptual design all the way through into construction. What you're not doing with KOPE is guessing. You're actually building smarter from day one. And this is because the future of construction is modeled, it's manufactured, and it's managed in a connected ecosystem. And so with that, welcome to KOPE, folks. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. We're going to focus in today on light gauge steel framing walls and how KOPE is really accelerating manufacturers and designers every single day in able to make those feasibility studies, and exactly how they can transfer that into traditional, I guess, models and drawings. So before we dive into the nitty-gritty of that, I wanted to step back a little bit and just introduce KOPE itself as a business. So our team spans the UK, the US, Europe, and our HQ is based down in London. And as a team, we all have extensive experience in construction. So some of us are engineers, some of us are qualified architects, some of us are software engineers, some of us are unbelievably talented computational experts. And together we have provided KOPE as a platform to allow you to move beyond that traditional design and construction. So I guess where did KOPE start? KOPE 0.1 or pre-version 1. KOPE worked with a UK-based off-site supplier, and they had a problem and they had a target, and the target was to double production capacity. That sort of individual design change would take up to 5 months. It would require thousands of drawings to be updated, and what KOPE was tasked to do was to deliver a system that could take that and speed it up. And with KOPE, they were able to validate that architectural design model and then go all the way through to this fabrication ready model in less than 5 minutes. And it was less of that design and architecture and more of how does this building go together? How do these studs interact with the wall? How does the MEP interact with that? Where is the structure? Where's the structural loading going in? How many and my bill of materials and how much I actually need in order to be able to fabricate these. And just a little bit of a little bit of a look at essentially the plugin that was built. So here you can see this really quick and fast automation of placing the walls, placing the floors, really to a high level of fabrication detail, making sure that then you can go through and have a look at how ceilings work and then get those bills of materials out. As you can see, vastly sped up, completely automated, and then being able to draw those, create those drawings and those bills of materials from that as well. And the team sat there and had a look at what they'd achieved and said, well, okay, we've managed to do this for this particular customer in this particular scenario. But what would happen if we could do this for all products? What if a designer could go and take a manufacturer's product and actually implement that into their model and then start to understand not just the feasibility of that product, but also understand the logic a little bit better? Is can that actually be fabricated? Can it actually be placed inside my model? Which then of course makes it a lot easier for those fabricators downstream, because it's already been taken into account exactly how these things are going to fit inside the model. And then of course it's for those in the detailing arena are able to take that design model, whether they build their own again, but then use KOPE again to get into that really quick automated level of detail with all the manufacturing details that are required. So I guess typically who do we work with? So Saint-Gobain, one of our investors, we work very heavily with those guys. Anyone that's followed our LinkedIn and some of the posts that I personally have created, we very recently onboarded Howick and their extender system onto KOPE platform, which is a telescopic light metal framing system that can be carried in, and then the telescopic system takes up the tolerances. And then of course businesses like Interwall and DPR Construction as well. And we can dive in a little bit into some of these guys as we move towards the case study section at the end of the presentation. So I want to explain a little bit more of what we actually do and how we actually get there. So we do a lot of research. Our technical teams, they start to understand exactly how these individual products and these systems are made, how they go together, how they perform, what happens at individual corner intersections, what happens at a T-junction or at a cross, what happens at this particular section here, what happens at an opening. And that really then allows us to take all of this information and all of the behaviors and the logic that are available inside these products to then start to build rules and constraints and ultimately codify them so that they can be applied completely automatically by someone that doesn't necessarily need to know how that system goes together. They can trust KOPE that it will go in as the manufacturer intended. That means that we can go instantly with all the studs, the boards, the panels, and we continue to build all of the automation features and functions as well. We can then take these and help the user panelize and then start to have a look at that panelization strategy versus a traditionally built or a traditional on-site, and then again start to look at the time, cost and carbon, and we're able to validate the feasibility of any of those projects or any of those products in those projects at a really early stage, and it allows people to get involved in the design stage a lot earlier, and it also allows you to optimize the placement and get a much better understanding. We also do enough research to understand exactly the tools that you guys use, understanding your workflows, understanding exactly how you design, you detail, and you fabricate today, whether that's using a Grasshopper script, whether that's using Tekla Structures, whether that's using MWF or an add-on inside Revit. We understand the way that these systems go together, both generically and with all of the manufacturers that we partner with in order to bring those to COPE. You'll have seen lots of different level of detail, and COPE can go from a very simple design model and add that fabrication level of detail, or it can take a very high standard of model and start to have a look at individual things like the fire ratings, like acoustic ratings, and really start to dive in and understand that model, because context is key. So wherever you are within that design phase, we're able to explore the appropriate outputs for you guys as you're using COPE and continue along your journey. And those have real world impacts. So this is a case study you'll see a little bit later on, but essentially you bring that project holistically into COPE, you test individual scenarios, and then you are able to get that instant quote and fabrication data along with the feasibility that's available. So where does COPE fit in, and where can you use COPE? So I'll just dive in a little bit there, a little bit deeper. So what we want to do is deliver a connected workflow, as I said at the beginning, start to understand the product rules and allow you to digitize the parts of your design at a really deep level. And here what we're going to do is show you how you can go from Revit into COPE, and then you can take that all the way through into Tekla Structures as well for your product detailing. Now, that's not to say that that is the only flow that you can do. Of course, we're able to go from Revit all the way into COPE. We can start to do that design iteration, and we can push that back into Revit for further design or further work. And then we can take that into Tekla Structures. Likewise, if you already have a model in Tekla Structures with walls in this case, you're able to bring those into COPE and do your panelization strategies, optimization, and then start to bring that automated placement back into Tekla to continue down that detailing workflow. So I showed you a little bit of COPE at the beginning. What I wanted to do is give you an idea of exactly how it works. And so what you're going to see here is us essentially take a single level of this building, and this is a building that you will see continue through the demonstration today, and you can start to configure it exactly how you'd like using generic benchmark products or the products that we have available inside there. You're able to do different types of offsets. You can add insulation. You can actually place just framing and no boards. You can choose the variants and the sizes that are available to the application as well. And naturally, you can then start to configure the framing through different profiles and gauges, put conditional inputs in there for different sizes of opening, having to use a heavier gauge or a different type of header section. And once you've done that, all you're going to do is hit apply. And although this is a video, that is live. That is as quick as COPE actually applies this, applies geometry inside the model. And then we have different types of features and functions like data tables and a different way to digest all the information that COPE has generated for you. So you don't have to download anything or go to any other software suite or any other tools in order to be able to interrogate this model, understand the metrics that are coming out of it, like your carbon, like the different heaviest weights, like framing cost, boarding cost, and the different waste ratios. And then obviously you can interrogate those individual parts to make sure that they've got all the correct properties assigned to them so that you can transfer those all the way through your workflow. You'll find in COPE all of the typical features and functions that you would find in a 3D viewer. So you can hide, you can isolate. And once you're actually happy with that, what you're then going to do is start to generate your deliverables. So in this case, and for the purpose of the webinar today, we're downloading our interoperability files for Tekla and for Revit. But of course, what we're able to do is also export a GLB if you just want to be able to visualize that model, or you can go straight to an IFC4 as well and start to share that with other stakeholders. So at this point, I'd like to say thank you all for listening over the first part of this, and I'll see you all very shortly. I am going to hand over to Radu, who is going to take us through the Revit portion of the webinar.
Here we go. Hopefully everyone can hear me. So we're going to look at Revit and what we can do with this integration. And the main use case we're going to look at is having a design in KOPE that you've optimized, you've generated your panels and everything for, and you want to bring that into Revit to continue editing, to maybe make drawings or to do coordination or all sorts of other downstream tasks that you might do in Revit. So um, let's look at one of the first features that enables you to do that in this kind of KOPE integration. And the first important one to note is that we import elements as native Revit elements. So we create structural framing members, we create instances of families. There's no direct shapes, no IFCs, no kind of non-editable geometry. And the reason this is important is because we want KOPE to fit within your workflow and not require you to kind of go out of your way to continue editing. So KOPE is not a dead end. You do your work in it, you optimize your designs, and then you're free to continue downstream of KOPE and actually do more work, such as coordination or drawing. So what we're seeing here on the screen is using that import UI to basically import the first level, which is already done, and then a second level, which has extender framing applied. We're doing all the mapping, which we'll touch on in a second. And in 2 seconds or so, you get all of your framing members back in here. Like Sam mentioned, this is the telescopic extender framing that we've just imported. So that's why you see all of those columns into 2 parts. And I've purposely made them the wrong size when I did the mapping so that you can see these are native Revit elements. You can change the type, you can change all of the properties, and you can edit these things after the fact. So we're not putting a damper on what you can do after you've imported things. The next major feature we want to talk about for this integration is the fact that you can use your own Revit family. So in a previous life, I was a BIM manager, and I've used a lot of plugins and things that forced you to use their own families, and you couldn't do anything else. So we were dead set against something like that, and we wanted to provide you with the flexibility to use your own families, whether you've created them or you've downloaded them from the manufacturer website. So we actually give you this mapping UI where you can select which framing families or which boarding family you want to use and the types. And we actually let you map the parameters that KOPE will use for the width, the height, and the thickness of things, for example, so that we automatically generate all these types for you. So hundreds of types already populated for you. And what we're seeing on the screen here is that this is a normal Revit family. You can go in, edit family, you can change this opening, for example, that we had in this family when we will make it parametric. So we'll tie that to a type parameter. We'll load it back into the Revit project, and you'll see all of the instances and all of the types already update. This is normal Revit functionality, and the reason we wanted to show you this is so you see it's not some kind of magic voodoo family that you can't edit. You're literally free to kind of poke in the families, swap them for your own, and do whatever you need to do to them, which is what delivering projects is all about. So last bit we're going to look at with the Revit plugin before we look at the full workflow is the fact that you can actually use all of your native Revit editing tools after you've imported the design from KOPE. So move, copy, trim, array, you can swap types. All of this works natively with all of these elements because they are native Revit elements. So that's the beauty of going down this path rather than some custom geometry and requiring you to use specific plug-in tools inside the plugin to even move things or things like that. So we're able to change a framing member. We're able to, I don't know, trim a few of these structural framing beams. We can actually put a hole into the boarding by placing a family. Any of the normal Revit editing tools that you would use, where we're letting you use them. And this was important to us so that we don't place any artificial limitations on what you can do after KOPE. So once you have your design, you can continue editing it, and you can cater to all of those very specific project context or kind of changes. So for example, if you need to add another stud, you need to add some pattracing, or you need to change a couple of things in one particular corner, you're free to do that because you're natively editing things in Revit rather than having to go back and forth, essentially. So last thing we're going to show in this video before we move on to the full workflow is placing a void in this wall. So we can actually see the result of those edits we've just done, and to show you that all of these objects interact with other families inside Revit as they normally should. So those are the kind of the highlights of the plugin features. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the full workflow. So we have our building in Revit, and imagine you're either the manufacturer or you're a designer trying to work with a new product, and you have this design. You've generated some partitions for it in KOPE, and you want to see how they look inside of Revit, inside the project essentially, and continue detailing or coordinating or generating drawings. Whatever the use case, we allow you to go back into KOPE from Revit. You select the interoperability file we generate, and right off the bat, you see there's a couple thousand elements that we're going to be importing. The next thing we're going to do is go to the framing UI, and this is where you can do the mapping from a KOPE profile to a specific family and type in Revit. And if you noticed, I will pause it for a quick second. When we opened the framing tab, all of the mapping was already done for you. This is because the plugin is smart enough to actually try and guess and map to the right families if we can find them and the right types. If not, you have full control and you can map to your own. Same goes for boarding. You can select whatever family you want, and you can select which parameters we're going to use to actually set the dimensions of that board. So this is very cool because KOPE will generate hundreds of types for us for each one of those individual dimensions, which means you don't have to manage all of these instances manually or write scripts of your own. It's all native Revit types, and you can put them into schedules and do takeoff, and everything works beautifully. So now that the import is done, it only took a couple of seconds. It's all lined up beautifully. We're going to head over and import another floor, essentially. The second floor we're going to be importing is one with Extenda telescopic framing. So we're going to fire up the import UI again, select the interop file. And the thing you'll see about this telescopic framing is there's a lot of members, but there's no mapping. So this is a case where you have to do the mapping yourself. And I'm selecting a couple of different member sizes here, and you'll see that some I'm mapping to studs, some I'm mapping to tracks, so C channels or U channels. So you have complete flexibility here, and that list of families is dynamic. So it reads whatever is in your Revit file already, and it populates those lists for you. So the import is done, again, in 2 seconds for 1,200 members, so it was very fast. And you can see all of the telescopic framing with 2 separate members. They're all Revit elements, so you can continue to edit them after the fact. So now that we've imported this, we can keep editing. We can place a void in one of these panels, for example, and we're going to go ahead and make a copy of that stud. Let's say we want to double it up. So we're just going to use the native Revit copy tool, and then we're going to actually trim those members down to the kind of horizontal noggin member. Not a particularly standard design, I guess, but it shows you that you can do whatever you want with these elements after they've been imported in Revit. So in the span of the 3 minutes it's taken to show you this, we've gone from a KOPE import to a fully native Revit elements that we've edited, and we've imported multiple levels. So kind of highlights the power of this connected workflow where the data just seamlessly kind of flows into Revit and lets you kind of continue the design. So I'm going to go to the next slide and hand it over back to Sam to show you even more goodies on the Tekla side.
All right. There we go. So bear with me a second, and I will get past Radu's part, and we will move forward with the product detailing bit. So yeah, just to reiterate, I guess what you've seen there, and you're going to see in a second, is when you start in KOPE, you bring in that design file. That design file is essentially just the square, and we can have a look at that in Tekla Structures in a second. It's essentially the squares of the walls and how they might be interacting. What KOPE is doing is it is placing thousands and thousands of elements inside those walls to a manufacturer's level of detail. And then you're able to take those. When we have a look at the case studies towards the end of the webinar, what we're actually going to see is just how it takes maybe a week to do individual levels, and there can be multiple levels like you'll see in one of these case studies, and how you can change that from a week to about 5 minutes, depending on how complex the model is and how many different wall types you have and how long it takes you to be able to identify those and pull that out. But what we're going to do now is we're going to step forward and have a look at the KOPE to Tekla plugin that we have available. So we work with our Tekla Structures contractor, Tim Haverkamp, and he basically has worked with us to build these plugins that allows us to go from these really basic designs, these really basic walls, as we say, there's just the squares on the left hand side, to a rule-based application straight into a tool like Tekla Structures, where you can actually then continue to detail that, and you can continue to use the power and the automations that's already available outside the box, out of the box with Tekla Structures. So a little bit different to Radu's, I'm going to show you one long video at the end. Basically what we're going to do here is we're going to take that interoperability file, and that interop file it basically just holds very small amount of data that anybody can use in order to implement this into a tool of their choice. So if you're sat here having a look at what we're doing inside Revit and what we're doing inside Tekla and wondering, well, can that same file be used somewhere else? Please get in touch at the end of the demonstration. We can give you an interop file. You can then start to have a look at how you might be able to use your own code to start to implement that as well. So this is very much the beginning of our integrations going forward. So we'll take that file, and then as you'll see inside the video, the plugin will allow you, very much like the Revit one, to map those individual profiles to suit those project needs. Now, one thing that you'll see is we're not going to have every single manufacturer's section on there. We've got the generic sections for the US and the UK, and we can continue to add individual profiles and different sections. But by being able to map these individual profiles as you go into Tekla Structures, you can then start to have a look at some of the inbuilt ones. So if you look at an ETEX, a Duggan's, a BW, you start to have a look at METSEC sections. They're all available as profiles inside Tekla Structures, the same as that you can build those as families inside Revit. And that allows you to take what is essentially a very generic profile inside KOPE, if you've used our benchmarks, and then populate that model with specific manufacturer ones, even if we haven't yet onboarded them and have them available. So it's very much about being able to penetrate into as many different manufacturers that you guys might use, so that you can really start to maybe expand your supply chain or use all the different guys that you have within your supply chain as well. What we'll then start to do is refine those out so we can check those connections across the whole project. As you'll see inside the video, we automate the connections. You can set up which connection you'd like to use, and then you can place those. And because we're placing Tekla geometry, it allows you to use any of the Tekla tools that are available. Within our plugin, what we actually do is harness some of the direct modification tools, and we take a lot of the best different parts of different plugins that are available in Tekla, and we've added those to our plugin.
So let's take a look at the entire workflow from front to back. This is obviously Tekla Structures, and we're going to bring in a very typical architectural model, and we're going to place that into the model space. You can see this is the same sort of IFC that you would expect to get out of Revit. So it's got all of the information, walls, dumb geometry, not necessarily with any build-up information, just the squares that we want to be able to place that KOPE geometry into. Then I've got the KOPE plugin that's sat up on the ribbon, and we can navigate to where we have our KOPE file. So for this particular one, I'm just going to bring in the second level. And you can do a quick sanity check using the UI to make sure that you're going to bring in all the right information. You can then use the connections, so any of the connections that are inside Tekla Structures you can actually use at specific points. So for example, across the top track to studs, across the top of a lintel to a jamb, for example. And then that means that any of the ones that you might have created yourself can be used too. The benefit about this mapping here means that I'm actually able to say, okay, I want to use an ETEX, or I want to use a BW, or I want to use a Duggan's profile rather than use any of the generic ones. And then you can just run the plugin, which will place all of that geometry perfectly inside Tekla Structures, inside the same location that you will have seen it inside KOPE. The benefit of this now is obviously we've employed all of the connections inside that plugin, and so we can jump straight in, start to have a look at the detailing itself. Now, because these were created as assemblies inside KOPE, they'll obviously be brought in as assemblies, which means that we can then start to use all of the power and the features and functions inside Tekla Structures with its native geometry. So for example, as you've just seen, the numbering, and when we bring in this geometry, we actually create our own plugin, so our own steel panel, which allows us to harness some of the tools like direct modification, meaning that we can add openings. So let's say, for example, at this point we've received an MEP model. I actually need to add an opening for some of that, or I need to add a doorway or a window way because there's been a slight design change, but I don't want to have to rerun it inside KOPE. You have the ability to use all of the logic that's inside that plugin to very quickly change that. Of course, using direct modification means that we can drag and drop and we can push and pull geometry really quickly in order to be able to get to that last or that final state that we want to be able to fabricate from. So again, showing inside Tekla that because it's native geometry, we get all of the power. So because that assembly itself has changed, Tekla's telling you to renumber. But then we can start to use other manufacturers' tools as well. So for example, the Howick frame checker, we're going to go and check that we've got a good connection across there. Where it's got a bad connection, it will tell us, and we can go back into the model and we can change that, which then means that we can start to move towards fabrication and exporting all of these individual members. So for this particular part of the demonstration, we'll use the Howick export, select all the members that we want to be able to export out, send all of those into the file format that is required for the Howick machines, and I can show you that inside Excel in a second. There we go. And you can see all that fabrication information and geometry is available.
So moving on to our case studies, then there's only two, and I'm not going to go through all of these. These are readily available. These are readily available on our site, and we can sit down and have conversations specific to you guys if anyone's interested. But here, for example, is Interwall. So this is essentially a prefabricated panel that's available in two different sizes, and then whatever's left over on the wall is fabricated, bespoke fabricated. So this is a project at Wembley Park by Saint-Gobain, and they were finding that it was taking 32 hours of design time per floor in order to be able to optimize, or at least get as far as humanly possible without sinking considerable months of time into it. We actually changed that, and you can now do that in minutes. The optimization that was found using our optimization engine, which hasn't been shown here today, that I've posted videos about it. I'll certainly do potentially another webinar on that specifically. We'll run through hundreds and thousands of different configuration types based on the parameters that you've given it and the objectives that you want. And you can go away, you can go and have a break, have a cup of coffee, check some more drawings, and you can come back, and in projects like this, you can come back to find that you've actually increased the standardization across the project. You've then gone from a very low standardization to a high standardization, making sure that your profitability is there, but also that project is actually feasible using a product. You can see here Tom, who's the technical solutions director over at Saint-Gobain, was saying that they're able to qualify the suitability of using that particular product on that particular project in minutes rather than weeks. And so that's upfront understanding that whether you can generate the right amount of revenue, but also the right outcome for your client as well at the same time. We then start to move forward and have a look at a British Gypsum case study, and this one still amazes me today. I did actually post, I haven't got the list of 12 things that I found that the reduction in waste was equivalent to, but it's a lot of double-decker buses. So this was an 18-storey tower, and what we were essentially tasked with doing, or KOPE was tasked with doing, is finding a standard board size that was optimized across the entire project so that it minimized the amount of waste and so that you could install it quicker. And so using our optimization engine, we ran through thousands of different scenarios, and those were generated in a matter of minutes, and we saved 55% of the waste on there, which is 29 pallets worth, which is a considerable amount of articulated lorries. Go and have a look, go and fire it into ChatGPT and see how many different things there are that are available for 29 pallets of drywall waste. But yeah, Paul, as you see there, head of digital construction, said that on their very first project, they were able to identify those efficiencies using KOPE, and it's there, he says there, 2 articulated lorries worth of material over the course of the project, which is an incredible amount of time saving, and it does an incredible amount for the environment as well. So what I'm going to do here at this point is I'm going to hand over to Radu, and he is going to give you a quick whiz through of our roadmap that I know is incredibly excited to talk about, because we keep him locked in a room. So he's looking forward to that.
All right, there we go. So, like Sam said, yeah, it's been a while since I've done one of these, actually. I'm a bit rusty, so sorry if it's not been as smooth as it could have been. So, again, I just wanted to, before we look at the roadmap, stress what we've just seen Sam demonstrate and me earlier, going from basically nothing to everything in a matter of minutes. So, in KOPE, we do that with a design going from a generic design to a fully kind of resolved offsite product-enabled design in seconds or minutes for a full building. And now we're kind of closing the loop by allowing you to take that design and go into a fully editable native Revit or native Tekla Structures, so you can continue that workflow again in minutes. What we're going to see in the future on our roadmap is expanding in a couple of areas. First one is we're going to be expanding the products and categories that KOPE supports. So we've been very focused on internal partitions and walls in general in the kind of last period. We're going to be adding support for timber and wood. This is already live with some customers. Insulation products, composite or facade panels, and we're going to be adding support back for horizontals. And I say back because we've actually done precast concrete floors before, and we've temporarily kind of got sidetracked by the lovely problem of walls. So we've had to go deep and study that and resolve those fully before we came back to precast floors. The next thing we're going to look at is enable more advanced tools inside of KOPE. So we already have a lot of tools to kind of mine the data, get insights from your generated designs and make decisions. We're going to be adding a couple of extra to the arsenal of tools to enable very rich analytics and comparisons between designs. So if you want to compare your design with one size versus the other size, or versus traditional framing or another technique, we will have incredibly snazzy and data-rich comparison pages that you can use to make decisions, complete with AI insights. So I won't spoil too many of the surprises there, but watch out for any announcements. And we're going to be enabling apply to run again on specific elements. So in that use case you saw with the Revit and the Tekla plugin of I have a builder's work or a penetration in this wall. I need to frame it again. That's a fairly common workflow problem. So we're going to enable you to go into KOPE and select any number of elements and say, run again on this particular element, but maybe you change the settings, maybe add this extra hole on the wall. So a lot more granular application rather than to the full building in one go. And what I kind of hinted at earlier, we've just gotten started with these integrations. This is version 1 and already incredibly powerful. we're going to be taking the minutes it takes to get these designs back into these native tools down to seconds, and looking forward to adding things like real-time connections between them. So adding something in Tekla will reflect into KOPE and vice versa. And even more excited to connect to tools that are web and cloud connected as well. So things like Trimble Connect and other tools like Conic, Forma, all sorts of other tools that you can think of, who have models in the cloud that we can use. So if you guys are using one of those, talk to us after this call. We're excited to kind of get those connected and enable you to apply products onto your models directly from those tools as well, without having to kind of download a model, re-upload to KOPE, and kind of do this entire workflow. So I think that's it. As a bit of a recap, Sam, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. I'll leave you. You can keep the screen up. Yeah. So essentially, what you've seen here today is us go from this very low level of detail, this design model, this really quick, what products can I use in here? What's the feasibility of it? We've gone through and we've optimized that inside KOPE. We've added actual manufacturing logic or benchmark logic, so you can actually understand how these things are going to interact and affect your project metrics. And then being able to take those through into detailing tools like Tekla Structures and continue downstream to start to get those rolled and then manufactured in your facilities and then sent to site and coordinated appropriately. So that is what you have seen. I think we would take this opportunity to thank you all very much for your time. It's been lovely to spend some more time. It's been a while since I did a webinar as well, so it's been great to speak to you all. Some familiar faces on our contacts list. There aren't any questions that we have to answer right now, but like I said previously, Dave has posted myself and Radu and Justin's email addresses. We'll send this webinar out once it's rendered and we've managed to get it down and put it on YouTube. We'll send it out to you all so you all have copies. If you'd like to reach out, please feel free to. We can do bespoke conversations with you guys, and we can just do some proper demonstrations of KOPE and dive into all the features and functions that we have available. But I think I'll say thank you very much indeed for your time. I'll give everyone another. Well, I'll hang on the call for another 60 seconds to see if any questions come through. But if not, thank you all very much. Have a lovely day for those of you that have joined from the US, and have a lovely evening for those of you that are on this side of the water.